a subsidiary of Litote, an online clothing rental company, in 2019. It went into liquidation in 2020, and Lord & Taylor's stores were closed. Sadia Group purchased its assets and revived the brand in 2021 as an online store. And here we have the history. Under the Lord family, 1824 to 1916, English-born Samuel Lord started a dry goods business in New York in 1824 and opened the original store that would become Lord & Taylor in 1826 on Catherine Street in what is now Two Bridges, Manhattan. The shop stocked hosiery, Mrs. Ware, and cashmere shawls. His wife's cousin, George Washington Taylor, joined in 1834, and the store was named Lord & Taylor. The store continued to grow. It annexed 49 Catherine Street in 1832 and moved 6 years later to 61 to 63 Catherine Street. James S. Taylor, Lord's brother-in-law, replaced George Taylor in 1845. The company erected a new building at Grand and Christie Streets in 1853 and moved into that location the next year. Lord later named his son John T. Lord and his employee John S. Lyle as partners in the enterprise. On August 29, 1859, Lord & Taylor opened a second store on Broadway at Grand Associates. She opened what is credited as the first ever branch store in Manhasset, New York. Unlike earlier forays into the suburbs that consisted of smaller boutique-style shops, this was a merchandising effort that became the model for modern suburban shopping. The store consisted of 66 individual shops. Lord and Taylor's relationship with Raymond Loewy Associates continued until 1969, following the construction of the Stamford, Connecticut store, designed by Loewy Vice President Andrew Geller. Many of Lord and Taylor's special services, including personal shoppers, were introduced while Shaver presided. During this period, she introduced the Andrew Geller handwritten logo and the American Beauty Rose as icons of the store. Shaver died in 1959. William J. Lippincott was elected chairman and chief executive in 1972. His obituary, the New York Times read, "In his years as president and chairman, Lord and Taylor moved beyond its traditional territory, the Northeast, to open stores in Atlanta, Houston, and Dallas, and 4 stores in Illinois. A management shakeup ousted him in 1976. Under the leadership of CEO Joseph E. Brooks during the 1970s, the company aggressively expanded into Texas, Illinois, and Michigan. In the early 1980s, South Florida saw 11 stores opened in quick succession. Under May Department Stores Company, 1986 to 2005. When the May Company acquired ADG in 1986, it was assumed that May bought it just for the luxury division. The chain partially withdrew from the oil-shocked Texas and southern Florida markets in 1989 to 1990 after its 1986 acquisition by May. Under May, the majority of the upscale Hahn & Company, Wanamaker's, and Woodward and Lothrop chains were converted to Lord & Taylor. Jane T. Alfers became Lord & Taylor's second female president in June 2000. Former Neiman Marcus executive Brendan Hoffman replaced her in October 2008 when Alfers' contract had expired. A third female president, Bonnie Brooks, took over in 2011, and a fourth female president, Liz Rodbell, took over in 2013. Under Federated Department Stores 2005 to 2006, closings on August 20th, 2020. On Thursday, August 27th, 2020, the company announced that it was reversing its initial decision and would close all stores. On Monday, October 19th, 2020, Sadio Group LLC announced it would acquire Lord & Taylor for $12 million and would continue to operate the business as an online-only business. The transaction was approved the following day. Phased closures. On Monday, November 30th, 2020, Latote announced that Lord & Taylor stores would start a phased closure on December 29th, 2020, due to having favorable inventory levels throughout the holiday season. On Tuesday, December 29th, 2020, 18 out of 38 stores had permanently closed, and about a month later, the freestanding store in Pennsylvania had closed. Finally, on Saturday, February 27th, 2021, the remaining 19 stores closed for the final time. These stores would have closed on Sunday, but due to the Bergen County blue laws that occur on Sunday for the Westfield Garden State Plaza and Fashion Center locations, both locations in Paramus, New Jersey, it was decided to close all of the stores on Saturday. And that is the end of the entry for Lord & Taylor beyond the closure list. Our next department store Wikipedia entry deals with Thalhimers. This is the Thalhimers logo. Thalhimers was a department store in the southern United States. Based in Richmond, Virginia, the venerable chain at its peak operated dozens of stores in Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and one store in Memphis, Tennessee. Thalhimers' traditions were most notable during the holiday season, with visits from the sticker distributing Snow Bear, and in later years, the arrival of Legoland at the downtown Richmond store. William Thalhimer immigrated to the Richmond area from Germany in the early 19th century. In 1842, he opened a dry goods store, which his grandson, William B. Thalhimer, transformed into Richmond's first department store. In 1978, the company, by then developed into a regional department store chain, was acquired by California-based Carter Hawley Ale Stores. At one time, staged a protest against racial segregation at the Richmond Room. Some 34 were arrested, the city's first mass arrests of the civil rights movement. The case of Raymond P. Randolph, Jr. v. Commonwealth of Virginia, 1961, would test whether trespassing laws constituted a violation of free speech. Along with several other Thalhimers locations, the downtown flagship closed on January 22, 1992, after purchase by the May Company. It had been the last major department store in the once bustling retail corridor. Miller and Rhodes had closed in January 1990. The building remained vacant until demolished on June 12, 2004, to make way for a performing arts center. The department store's history, along with the history of the Thalhimer family, has been chronicled in the 2010 book Finding Thalhimers by Elizabeth Thalhimer Smart, the great-great-great-granddaughter of founder William Thalhimer. That is the end of the Thalhimers department store Wikipedia entry. Our last department store Wikipedia entry today is Gimbels. Gimbel Brothers, known simply as Gimbels, was an American department store corporation that operated for a century, from 1887 until 1987. Gimbel patriarch Adam Gimbel opened his first store in Vincennes, Indiana, in 1842. In 1887, the company moved its operations to the Gimbel Brothers department store in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It became a chain when it opened a second, larger store in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in 1894, moving its headquarters there. At the urging of future company president Bernard Gimbel, grandson of the founder, the company expanded to New York City in 1910. The company is known for creating the oldest Thanksgiving parade, the Gimbels Thanksgiving Day Parade, originating in 1920 in Philadelphia. Gimbels was also considered the chief rival of Macy's, with their feud popularized in American culture. As of 1930, Gimbels had grown to 20 stores, whose sales revenue made it the largest department store chain in the world. The company expanded to a peak of 53 stores by 1965 and closed in 1987 with 35 stores in Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Wisconsin, and Connecticut. Early history. The company was founded by a young Bavarian Jewish immigrant, Adam Gimbel, who opened a general store in Vincennes, Indiana. After a brief stay in Danville, Illinois, Gimbel relocated in 1887 to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which was then a boom town heavily populated by German immigrants. The new store quickly became the leading department store there. However, with 7 sons, Adam Gimbel saw the opportunity to expand elsewhere. In 1894, Gimbels, then led by the founder's son Isaac Gimbel, acquired the Granville Haynes store, originally built and operated by Cooper and Conard in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and in 1910 opened another branch in New York City. With its arrival in New York, Gimbels Massachusetts